you ever wondered how plants work their magic to turn sunlight into energy? It's like they have their own secret power plant. This power plant is called the electron transport chain, or also known as the ETC, and it's an incredible system that allows plants to harness sunlight and create energy.
So what exactly is the electron transport chain? Think of it as a high conveyor belt of proteins and molecules that move electrons around to produce energy. In photosynthesis, this incredible process happens in the thylakoid membranes of plant cells, where sunlight is captured and transformed into ATP and NADPH energy molecules that plants use to make glucose and grow. In cellular respiration, the ETC takes place inside the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, where food molecules are broken down and ATP is made to fuel all the cell's activities. So whether in the plants or animals, the ETC is the powerhouse of energy production.
But why is the ETC so important? Well, it's actually the engine that runs the whole show. The electron transport chain is crucial because it produces ATP, which is the cell's main energy currency. Without ATP, cells wouldn't have the fuel they need to do everything, from muscle contractions to cell division. In photosynthesis, the ETC captures light energy and turns it into chemical energy in the form of ATP and NADPH, which helps plants grow and give other organisms the food that they need. In cellular respiration, the ETC creates a proton gradient that powers ATP production, keeping everything from muscle movement to basic cell functions running smoothly. Simply put, without ATC, life as we know it wouldn't be possible.
How does ETC works in the cellular respiration? So, step 1 is ETC starts with energy carriers. So first, molecules called the NADH and the FADH, which are like energy carriers, bring high energy electrons to the electron transport chain. And these molecules were made earlier in the process of breaking down food for energy. And for step 2 is electrons enter the electron transport chain. So NADH gives its electrons to complex 1 and FADH2 gives its electrons to complex 2. And these proteins are located in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. And for step 3 is passing the electrons along. So the electrons travel through a series of protein complexes, which is the complex 1, the complex 2, the complex 3, the complex 4 on the inner mitochondrial membrane. With each step from the electrons is used to pump protons, which is the hydrogen ions, across the membrane into the space between the mitochondria's inner and outer membranes, creating a buildup of protons. And for step 4 is when the oxygen joins the process. At the end of the chain, oxygen, which is the oxygen we breathe, is the final stop for the electrons. Oxygen combines with electrons and some protons to form water, or H2O, which is then released as a byproduct. And for step 5 is the proton buildup. As the protons pump into the space between the membranes, they build up there, creating a proton gradient. Think of it like water building up behind a dam. And for step 6 is making the ATP. Now the protons want to flow back into the mitochondrial matrix to balance out the gradient. The protons flow through a special protein called the ATP synthase, which uses their movement to make ATP. And ATP is the main energy molecule our body needs to do work. And for step 7 is the importance of oxygen. Oxygen is crucial because without it, the whole process would stop. If oxygen doesn't accept the electrons at the end, the proton gradient wouldn't form, no ATP would be produced, and this means our cells wouldn't have the energy they need to survive. And for step 8 is the water as a byproduct. The final product of this process besides ATP is water. When oxygen accepts electrons and some protons, it combines with hydrogen ions to form water, which is then released from the cell. So, in summary, the electron transport chain, or the ETC, in the mitochondria uses electrons from energy carriers, which is the NADH and the FADH2, to produce ATP, the energy currency of the cell. And electrons pass through a series of protein complexes releasing energy that pumps protons across the inner mitochondrial membrane. This proton gradient powers ATP synthase to make ATP, while the electrons combine with oxygen to form water. Oxygen is essential for the process, and water is produced as a byproduct when electrons combine with oxygen and protons. And that's all for how does ETC work in the cellular respiration.
How does the electron transport chain function in photosynthesis? Today, I'll guide you through the step-by-step process of the light-dependent reactions, where sunlight powers the creation of essential energy molecules for plants. Without further ado, let's dive into how this remarkable system works. So for the first step is the light absorption. The light-dependent reactions begin when chlorophyll, the green pigment in plants, absorbs light energy from the sun. This light energy excites electrons in chlorophyll, boosting them to a higher energy level. The next step is the electron transport chain. The excited electrons are transferred to an electron transport chain in the thylakoid membrane of the chloroplast. Just like in the mitochondria during cellular respiration, the electrons move through a series of protein complexes in the thylakoid membrane. Each complex passes the electrons to the next one, releasing energy as they go. On to the next step is the splitting of water molecule. To replace the electrons that were lost from chlorophyll, water molecules are split into oxygen, hydrogen ions, which are the protons, and electrons. The oxygen is released as a byproduct, which is why plants produce oxygen during photosynthesis. The next step is proton pumping. The energy released as electrons move through the electron transport chain is used to pump hydrogen ions from the stroma into the thylakoid lumen, which is the space inside the thylakoid. This creates a concentration gradient with a high concentration of protons inside the thylakoid and the low concentration outside in the stroma. The next step is the ATP production via chemiosmosis. Just like in cellular respiration, the buildup of protons inside the thylakoid creates potential energy, like water stored behind a dam. Protons flow back into the stroma through an enzyme called ATP synthase, which uses the flow of protons to generate ATP from ADP and inorganic phosphate. This process is called chemiosmosis. On to the next step is the NADPH formation. At the end of the electron transport chain, the electrons are transferred to NADP+, a molecule similar to NAD+ in cellular respiration. Along with the proton, the electrons reduce NADP+ to form NADPH, another energy carrier that will be used in the next step of photosynthesis, the Calvin cycle. To summarize, the light-dependent reactions use sunlight to create energy molecules, which are ATP and NADPH, which is essential for the next stage of photosynthesis. Electrons move through a series of proteins in the electron transport chain, releasing energy that pumps protons into the thylakoid. The proton gradient allows the enzyme ATP synthase to make ATP, and the electrons are used to form NADPH. Oxygen is released as a byproduct when water molecules are split.
According to Ahmad, Goldberg, and Kawaji 2023, the electron transport chain consists of 4 protein complexes that work together to generate ATP through redox reaction, creating an electrochemical gradient. This happens both in mitochondria for cellular respiration and in the chloroplast for photosynthesis. In cellular respiration, electrons are harvested from breaking down organic molecules, while in photosynthesis, electrons are energized by light and used to build carbohydrates for the plant.
Here are some insights from experts in the field. What happens if the ETC isn't working properly?
If the electron transport chain malfunctions, the cell won't be able to produce enough ATP. This can result in a host of issues like fatigue, muscle weakness, or even cell death. In photosynthesis, a malfunctioning ETC means less glucose is made, which is crucial for plant growth. In cellular respiration, energy production would be impaired, affecting all vital functions from metabolism to movement.
How can you tell if the ETC isn't working?
If the ETC is under freeze, signs might include unexplained tiredness, muscle weakness, or poor growth in organisms. At the cellular level, scientists can use tests that measure ATP levels or oxygen consumption to spot any ETC problems. Abnormal buildups of certain metabolites or changes in pH might also signal issues with the ETC.
To wrap it all up, the electron transport chain, or ETC, is the unsung hero of energy production, turning light and food into ATP that fuels life itself, whether in plants, where it converts light into energy, or in plants, where it helps us turn food into fuel. The ETC is essential for keeping everything running smoothly. Without it, cells wouldn't have the energy they need to perform vital tasks, leading to serious health problems. So the next time you're out in the sun, think about how plants are harnessing its power with their own energy making system, the ETC.